Karmani, inaction. Akarma, inaction. Yaha, one who. Pashat, observes. Akarmani, in inaction. Cha, also. Karma, fruit of action. Ya, one who. Saha, he. Buddhiman is intelligent. Manusheshu, in human society. Sa, he. Yukta is in the transcendental position. Kritsna karma krit, although engaged in all activities. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. Please repeat. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. Purport: a person acting in Krishna consciousness is naturally free from the bondage of karma. His activities are all performed for Krishna. Therefore, he does not enjoy or suffer any of the effects of work. Consequently, he is intelligent in human society, even though he is engaged in all sorts of activities for Krishna. Akarma means without reaction to work. The impersonalist ceases fruitive activities out of fear, so that the resultant action may not be a stumbling block on the path of self-realization. But the personalist knows rightly his position as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he engages himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness. Because everything is done for Krishna, he enjoys only transcendental happiness in the discharge of his service. Those who are engaged in the process those who are engaged in this process are known to be without desire for personal sense gratification. The sense of eternal servitorship to Krishna makes one immune to all sorts of reactionary elements of work. So the text again. Karmanya karmaya pashed akarmani cha karmanyaha sabuddhiman manusheshu siyukta kritsna karma krit. One who sees an action in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Taramane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskatyade Satarane. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Tri Vida Narakasyedam Dwaram Nashritam Atmanaha Kama Krodha Tata Lobhas Tasmat Etam Trayam Chayet. That there are three gates leading down to hell, namely lust, anger, and greed. Every sane person should become free from these three gates because they lead to the degradation of the self. In other words, the soul is entangled simply because of his desire. Actually, the soul cannot actually, the soul desires to be put into material concept of life and dovetails his desires with that of lust, anger, and greed. And the material nature rewards the soul with illusion, forgetfulness, and loss of intelligence. But when the soul decides to follow Krishna, then the result is that he comes under Krishna's protection. Daiviyesha gunamayi mamamaya duratya mameva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. This divine energy of mine is difficult to overcome, but those who take shelter in me can easily cross beyond it. So the difference between a conditioned soul and a liberated soul is that the conditioned soul is under the protection of the divine energy. And it's not very difficult. Daivi ahatmanas tumam parta, daivim prakritim ashitya, vajantyananyamanaso, yatva bhutidim avyam. Those who are great souls are always under the protection of the divine energy because they're fully engaged in my devotional service. Daivi yesha mahatmanas tumam parta, daivim prakritim ashitya. They've taken shelter of the divine energy. Vajantyananyamanaso. They're always engaged in my service. Vajantyananyamanaso. Gyatva bhutidim avyam. And how to engage in Krishna service? Sadatam kirtayantomam yatantas shadrida vrataha namasyantas shamam bhakta nityukta upasate. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, these great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. In other words, only due to forgetfulness of Krishna does the soul imagine himself to be a competitor of Krishna. And therefore he comes under the illusory energy. The illusory energy is a gift for those souls who want to imagine themselves they're not subordinate to Krishna, that they're on the same level or on a higher level than Krishna. And the result of that reward is Bhayam Dvitiya Vineshitasyat Viparyo Smriti. Bhayam Dvitiya Vineshitasyat Visho Viparyo Smriti. That when the soul turns his face away from Krishna and imagines himself to be on the same level or equal or greater than Krishna, then the result is that instead of being Krishna's servant, he thinks he's Krishna's competitor. And he becomes full of bhayam, fear. In other words, anyone who's identified themselves or misidentified themselves with his body has to be fearful. Because one doesn't know who one actually is. One thinks himself to be something when one is not. And this body is temporary, and therefore one does not know what one's next destination is. Therefore one must be fearful. Anyone who's in the material world and a material identification, he has to be in a state of fear to one degree or another. Even Brahma is said to be fearful, and therefore the servants of Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, they say that Brahma, he's in the forest, he's always meditating, because he doesn't know how long he has, because he figures he's going to die very shortly, that now he only has 150 trillion years left to live, approximately. So he's afraid he's going to die very soon. Because for us, 150 trillion years would seem like it's quite a long period of time to live. But for Brahma, who's in ecstasy all the time goes very quickly. Because we're suffering, therefore time seems to go relatively more slowly. It's like if you're on the dentist chair and you hear the sound of the drill, time suddenly goes very slowly. Because the more pain one is in, the more suffering one is experiencing, the slower time goes. And the more one feels happy, or to speak of blissful, then the quicker time goes. how long does it take to eat your favorite ice cream cone? It seems to disappear right away. As soon as it touches your hand, it's gone. It's like children in school, they're looking forward to the weekend. And the weekend seems to just fly by. And then they're back in school for 5 days, being tortured by the school, which goes very slowly, till the next weekend comes, which flies by. Even the vacation, I remember always looking forward to the vacation. The vacation went a lot quicker than the school seemed to go. For 2 months, whatever it was, vacation would just fly by, and you find yourself back in school again. So, the conditioned soul, because he's turned his face away from Krishna, therefore he's been put under the illusory energy of Krishna. We have no choice. Either we understand Krishna and understand that he's the proprietor of everything, and therefore utilize everything for his service under his direction of himself and his representatives, and what to speak of doing it to please Krishna. And then one becomes free from the reactions of one's work. But as soon as one forgets that everything belongs to Krishna and thinks that everything here could things belong to me here, and things are meant to be utilized to gratify my senses, namely lust, anger, and greed, then one is put into illusion, forgets one's real identity, and acts in such a way as to become further entangled in the modes of material nature. And therefore one is sure to take birth again in the material world in some species of life. Urdvam gachata satvasta, made tishtati rajasa, jaganya gunavritista, ado gachati tamasa. If we act in the mode of goodness, we go upward to the heavenly planets. We act in the mode of passion, we remain on this earthly plane. And if we act in the mode of ignorance, we go down to the abominable species of life. In any case, whether goodness, passion, or ignorance, one is bound to the material energy, into the material concept of life. And therefore it said, even Brahma, Brahma bhuvana loka, mama petya punarjanma dukhaliyam ashasvatam, nat muvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramangataha. Mama upeti, after attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never come back to this temporary material world. Mama petya punarjanma dukhaliyam ashasvatam, nat nuvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramangata, because they have attained the highest perfection. On the other hand, Brahma bhuvana loka punarvartanojana mambupetya tukonteya punarjanman vidyate. Actually, so Brahma bhuvana loka, from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, they're all places of misery when repeated birth and death take place. So we can act in the mode of goodness and go up to the higher planetary systems and relatively enjoy temporarily. Or we can stay on this earthly-like platform and work in order to attain some results from our activities. Or we can go down to the abominable species of life or the lower planets and suffer even more than we are now. So that's our decision. Therefore, it says here that one who realizes that we don't really have so much of a choice. Either we act for Krishna, or we're going to have to act under the modes of nature. And we act under the modes of nature, then we're bound by our desire, by the reactions of our work, to get another body, even if it's a heavenly planet body, a demigod body. Still, one will have to enjoy and some form of life, so-called enjoy, for some time, and then having to come back to the earthly planet again. Go on a short vacation to the heavenly planets, have a good time, and then come back, hopefully not at the end of Kali Yuga. So therefore, one who's intelligent knows that there's no real choice. Well, the choice is either act in the material concept of life and be fearful what the results will be, or act in Krishna consciousness. If one becomes Krishna conscious, then one realizes everything as it really is, and therefore there's no fear. One realizes everything is under Krishna's control, and therefore there's nothing to hanker for, there's nothing to lament about. The only thing is to become conscious of Krishna and do something to please him. And that will save one from the reactions of all kinds of activities. So I'll stop there. Any questions? People think they have a lot of choices. As I said before, Sridhar Maharaj was giving a lecture at the Woodstock. Woodstock means that there's thousands of intoxicated hippies. And Sridhar Maharaj was giving a lecture about the four regular principles, especially emphasizing the need to avoid intoxication. So the result of the lecture is that someone took a beer can and threw it at him. It didn't hit him though. So he picked up the beer can and looked at it and said, "This is not my brand." So in other words, people think that their free will is which brand they choose, of whatever it may be. But that's not free. Whether you do one brand or the other brand makes no difference, because either way you're going to be tangled in the reactions of the work. Only if one does something, chooses what Krishna wants, does what Krishna wants, one is actually free from the reactions of one's activities. Because people don't know that. Te vidu swartikatim hi Vishnu. They don't know that the actual object of life is to obtain Krishna. No matter what happens in the material world, then still if one attains Krishna, then one's life is successful. And if one doesn't obtain Krishna, that whatever one has done was simply a waste of time. One may be successful from the material point of view, but at the end of life, if one does not go make progress towards Krishna consciousness, then it was considered to be wasting his time. Unless one realizes the aim of life is to get out of the bodily concept of life, one will think that he was making progress. One becomes more absorbed in the bodily concept of life. But that kind of progress is not really desirable. Therefore, Queen Kunti prays, Dhanma Ishvarya Shuta Shri Vira Edaman Atmadakpaman Naivahat Yavadatin Vai Tvam Akinchana Gotra. That anyone who thinks, well, getting wealth or getting high birth or getting bodily beauty or material education is not bad in itself, but to desire to get these things, to make one's life dedicated to get these things, that's not very good. Why? Because by desiring to get these things, thinking that they'll make one happy and successful in life, the result is that instead of taking shelter of Krishna, one is taking shelter in one's material achievements. And therefore one will not be able to chant Hare Krishna without any kind of feeling. And without chanting Hare Krishna with any feeling, one doesn't make any progress towards liberation. One stays in the material concept of life from one life to the next. Therefore, Queen Kunti wanted problems, because when there were problems, they naturally turned towards Krishna to help them. And therefore, all their material problems, their material concepts of life, wasn't a problem anymore, which is our real problem. And if we think our problem is we don't have enough money, we don't have enough prestige, enough followers, enough material knowledge, etc., then that's the problem. Not having them is not a problem. The problem is hankering for them. That's the real problem. Having them is not a problem either, but hankering for them is a problem. Just like Pundarik Vijayanidhi, he had an enormous opulence, and yet he was unattached to it. When Mukunda and Gadadhar Pandit went to visit him, Gadadhar Pandit Sora, Pundarik Vijayanidhi was lying on a very opulent silk bed. He had a hookah, he was dressed in silk cloth, and he seemed to be an enjoyer of the material world. So Gadadhar Pandit was thinking, Mukunda told me this was the great devotee, but he looks like a great material enjoyer. Until Mukunda recited the verse from the Bhagavatam, Aho Bhakti Swapacho, Aho Bhakti, that, oh, how wonderful it is that Krishna, that Putana came to Krishna as a witch wanting to kill him, and he gave him her poisoned breast to suck, and yet Krishna watered him with the so merciful that even though she was a demon wanting to kill him, he took her as a mother and gave her liberation in Goloka Vrindavan as his mother. Who could be more merciful than Krishna? And when Pundarik Vijayanidhi heard this, he became so ecstatic that he started to roll on the ground, and he destroyed his bed and the hookah and everything else. He was so ecstatic, he couldn't control his emotions. And he started to roll everywhere. And then Gadadhar Pandit realized that this is actually a great devotee. Although apparently he was an enjoyer of the material world, but within himself he was always absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Similarly, when Sudama, who was very poor, went to visit Krishna, he was in ecstasy when he met Krishna in Dwarka. He didn't ask for anything, but when he came home, Krishna gave him more opulence than that of the King of Heaven. And yet he lived in full consciousness of Krishna despite his opulence, and eventually he went back with his wife to the spiritual world. So I'll stop there. Any questions? Because I don't think we have to worry about Krishna giving us the opulence to the King of Heaven right now. But yes.
Hare Krishna. In the verse was saying that who see in action, and in inaction, action, see the right way. So can you explain a little more about that?
Well, action means you're getting results of your work. You're thinking yourself to be the doer. That you're doing something, and therefore you're hankering for getting some results for it. So the result is that you're getting results. Even if you're not seemingly doing anything, you're inactive, like the Buddhas. You're trying to avoid all activities. But unless you're doing it for Krishna, still you're breathing in, you're killing so many insects, you're walking on the street, you're killing so many germs and insects, and you're getting a reaction for it, because you're not Krishna conscious. On the other hand, one may be fully engaged in activities like Arjuna, killing people on the battlefield, but because he was doing it for Krishna, he wasn't getting any reaction for it. Therefore it's considered inaction. Well, someone who's not doing anything, but if it's not for Krishna, he's getting the results. He'll have to give the results of killing so many living entities, or just thinking about so many things. And therefore he's actually doing things in the material world. We'll have to get a reaction for it. Is that clear? Anything else? Khala Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.
It's not proper distance. Here it should be.
Yeah, but it was before it was here. He was sitting here with the hat, and it was here. So when he changes,
But also now you know that there is no class. It should be microphone should be in a proper position.
okay. One prayer I have. Please come here.
Only one.
Don't push it too strong here, because it's very hard. You know this. It holds very good, even if it's not so with all the force. Not this, you know.
Yeah, yes, you have put it a bit.
Then I can't take away. To hear it is okay to hear, but more it's difficult to unscrew.
So many problems.
I don't know. It's not a problem. This is the problem.
It's Krishna's problem anyway.
Oh yeah, okay. You can complain to me. Matei ima probleme. Matei ima probleme.
Zdravim.
Kaj?
Zdravim.
Ja, ne vem, a vzel tablete ali ni vzel, ali vzel dve.
Ga meče, a?
Moktel je vrgel v koš smeti.
Dobro, ni WC vsaj.
Kaj?
Vsaj ni v WC.
To je prav način, ne, sem takrat, ko so ga odprali, takrat je takole pustil na vse dulce ene,
Što mu zdaj?
v drugi stopenci. Kaj?
To je že nekaj cajta nazaj, ne?
Ja, še letke tačega poleta teče.
A dela to? A dela je v penziji, kaj ima?
Ne, on ne sme delati še.
Ne sme delati.
Je še pokojnem še. Ne sme delati, sploh ne sme delati. Še ne poleta približno.
Ne sme delati.
Ja.
Kaj bo dela, bo?
Ja, tam ti skrajne ulice, ko gre. Kakšne 2 ure, za 5 evrov. Kakšne 2 ure tam sedi.
Aha, tako ima težko, a?
Ja.
To je nič ne
Mislim,
angažiran.
ni socialno drugače.
Ne, ni problem, da si socialen, problem je, nisi angažiran, ne?
Hm?
Nič ne delaš, pot je on zdela.
Ja, to je problem.
To je glavni problem.
Seveda je problem. Glavno, hudičeva naravnica.
Seveda, on zdresira eno vrtnino.
Vse se sem moj potencijalno njena, da so prav so domočansko, jaz sem pa šel. Njega sem pa poslal, ker se z njega malo pogovarjal, svoj pozdrač, da boš strano. Dobro, sem imel kakšne fintice, ampak nič posebno. Ne znam si tega pomoči biti. Samo on ima tudi tapete, ne? Samo nima za hudov. Ne, on ima tisto poškodbo, seček ima. Njega so mi takte rešili, da veš to. Ja.
Koga?
Kaj?
Koga?
Ne, ne.
A bi živeli, ja?
Aha.
A bi živeli?
Ne, ni bil in takrat ga metali neki. In takrat je pa so ga bakte rešili. In takrat sem v bakte rekel, da bo pri meni živ. Vse sem šlopa naprej, kaj se pravi.
Ja.
Ja. So enkrat v Potočki Banatu živel. Tako mi je rekel, zdaj se ne naprej. Šlopa sem na pego, pa sem na tukaj. Je bil močen doživetje, da bo tam.
Kje je bil?
Ja. Glavno bakte je ISKCONa so ga rešili. To pa je to, za greta, on se ne naš premaknil kot hostel.
Ne.
Ne. Čeprav ne bil sigurno, ne bil močen tako po znanju, ne? Ampak ga ne moreš početi. Tako opustil to mišljenje. In pa pole rad. Na tej, na pomudno posluha nima.
Zdajle?
Mislim, da bankomat.
Ja.
Ja, moški da ga imam doma, da imaš. Ne bil zikaj tam bankomat zaenkrat. Ja, dokaj tudi sistem bančni še rata, ga treba ponuzati. Če rabiš keš, ga podvigneš. Dokaj ni vojna, pa take krize hude. Pa tudi, če vse zgubim, kar imam na banki.
A imate kaj na banki?
Kaj?
Da dosti?
Če vse zgubim, kar imam na banki, ne vem.
No, ne bo rešil.
Kaj?
Noben ne bo rešil.
Ja, sem pogrešal, ampak mislim, ni to, da bi da bi, mislim, čisto bankrotiral.
Ne.
Ne, ni več ni nobenih zalog, ki je še prej zamujil, da se je mesec, 2 meseca splačili prej. Zdaj se še ne malo popravljati, kaj se pravi.
Ja, ste nategočeni.
Ne, s temi triki v Ljubljani tvoje, ampak dobro, pa še nisem čist. Dobro, pa še nisem čist. Ljubljana predela. Dom se plače s stajnim mestom. Stajnim mestom. 28 ga je zapadl račun, ko sem že dom splačil.
Ja.
To se včasih ne mogu predstavljati. Kaj je to? Gospa, lahko še pol meseca stegnete.